Hey Nick, how are you?
I'm good, and you, Bruno? How's it going?
Uh, yeah, very well, thanks. Very well, thanks. You looking forward to the real estate investor summit?
I am coming up at the end
Yeah,
of the month. It's going to be a good time.
yeah, it should be good. Yeah, so
Yeah.
if anyone's interested, it's Nick's going to be there. I'm probably going to be there. Still deciding. Might have a trip on the day, but yeah, it sounds pretty cool. Saw the speaker lineup. Sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have, um, first of all, we've got meetings that we need to go to. So today's going to be a quick one. And then I'm looking for the questions. Here we go. So I've got a question from you from Johan Lemma, asking, in your opinion, is the mandatory disclosure form applicable to commercial or residential leases? The PPRA regulations do not distinguish between sales and rentals, which we're aware of. We also have landlords, mostly property funds, who refuse to complete the forms and say it doesn't apply to them. How do we handle it if they don't sign the form? So this it clearly looks like it's an estate agent that has landlords that are property funds, and yeah, he's having issues with getting them signed the mandatory disclosure form.
So I think for me, you know, the act is still quite new, so we're still fleshing out a lot of the stuff. But the one thing that the act doesn't do is obviously distinguish between the commercial and the residential aspect. It's you know, obviously, if you're performing the functions of the estate agent, then there are certain obligations that come along with that performance. And obviously, we've gone over, you know, estate agents and what exactly that means in other videos. But for me, when it comes to the distinction between a commercial or residential, I don't think, you know, from what I've looked at, there's no real distinction that's saying that commercial is excluded in the circumstances. I think it really comes down to what functions are you performing. If you are an estate agent, and you are performing the function of an estate agent and receiving a remuneration, in other words, you're falling under the definition of the act. For me, you've got to comply with the act. Okay. There's nothing that I've seen that would exclude you because of the type of property that you're dealing with, and the act certainly doesn't do that. So from my perspective, you know, does the non-disclosure form, you know, apply to residential or commercial? I would say both. You know, in circumstances where you are an estate agent, where you're performing these functions, where the landlord's using you, it doesn't matter what type of property you're using, call it commercial, retail, industrial. If an estate agent is performing that function, the act obviously has to be complied with in the circumstances, and the mandatory disclosure form is a part of that. Now the other part of the question is obviously property funds. Now, as you pointed out, Bruno, we're going from the assumption here that the Johan who's written in is an estate agent in the circumstances, and as I say, then there's got to be compliance with the act in the circumstances. But there are a lot of funds where, you know, our bigger property funds in the country don't actually use estate agents in any way, or don't use managing agents in any way, and they do it on an in-house basis. Those situations are very different, because then you are not using a third party who is fulfilling the function of an estate agent in the circumstances. And then obviously the act is not going to come into application for that particular transaction. But you know, if it is a large fund and they are using an estate agency in the circumstances, or some third party who is performing as an estate agent and receiving a commission or remuneration for that particular function, then unfortunately, you know, our view is obviously you've got to comply with the act, and the mandatory disclosure form is part of that.
Sure. No, I totally agree with you. Absolutely.
Perfect. It's really kind of simple one. I know a lot of our listeners are not going to be the happiest with it, but unfortunately, that's the way the law goes sometimes.
Look, I suppose it's important to point out that at this moment, obviously bearing in mind that this is a relatively recent introduction, there's a lot not that much case law around mandatory disclosure forms in general. So, I mean, the general perception, or at least this is the opinion that I carry, is that you only fill in what you can fill in. So having a mandatory disclosure form as an agent, for starters, doesn't put you in any position where, I mean, if the seller lies, he lied. It's not your fault as an agent. Yes, one could argue that because of a sort of a professional obligation, if he was lying, maybe there could be something to it. But if you accept that the seller can put whatever he wants in there, you just need to get it signed. But same thing applies to the seller to a certain degree. He can only put in there what he knows. So mandatory disclosure form, he goes and discloses issues that he's aware of. If this isn't to say that now you need to go pay for 100,000 rand for someone to come in and comb the entire property and figure out absolutely what every crack is about. It's the act doesn't require that. It requires a level of diligence. Yes, you as an owner should know what's wrong with your property. It doesn't require you to go into a lot more depth in that. And like I said, as case law develops, you might find that some judge at some point or another places some kind of extra obligation on an owner, but that's not yet the case. So as a property fund, you guys kind of know what your properties look like. It shouldn't be that difficult to do the snag list ahead of time, as opposed to doing it while you're showing the property to a tenant. It is the same thing. Spend the exact same amount of time doing it.
Yeah,